From evil poachers who got what they deserved to careless performers attacked by their pet props, here are 10 times animals got their revenge on humans. Gorilla attack. Gorillas do not appreciate being messed with in the wild by tourists, and one gorilla got his revenge by scaring the life out of a group of tourists while they were trekking in Rwanda. This was even captured on film. The tourists thought it would be fun to stroll into the jungle and get a few photos of some wild gorillas, but the oversized apes didn't feel so great about it. One big mean gorilla rampaged at 2 of the tourists and their guide, throwing 3 of them to the ground with one muscly arm. If not for the intervention and quick thinking of the guide, the gorilla very well could have beaten the tourists beyond recognition. The tourists were so shocked and terrified that they basically cowered on the ground in fear as the gorilla terrorized them. But in the end, everyone was okay. The tourists got quite a scare, but they left with their lives. They will probably think twice before going into the wild to bother some gorillas again. In Rwanda, gorilla tourism is actually big business. There are around 1,000 of the animals in the region where this incident took place. A fully grown male gorilla can weigh around 420 pounds. Elephant crushes hunter. Talk about instant karma. In this story reported by the New York Post, a big game hunter is killed when a shot elephant lands directly on top of him. You might say he was beaten by his own game. This was a South African big game hunter, a 51-year-old man who was leading a hunt in Zimbabwe when him and his group walked into the path of a herd of elephants. 3 of the elephants charged, as elephants do when threatened. The big game hunter fired at the animals and was then caught off guard by a surprise attack from the side. A 4th elephant picked him up with her trunk. One of the other hunters shot the animal in his defense, and the animal fell over onto the hunter, killing him pretty much instantly. This is actually kind of sad, as the man leaves behind a wife and 5 children. However, that's kind of what happens when you mess with elephants. It's reported that he made his money by taking wealthy Americans out into the wild to shoot trophy animals, and this is just the kind of thing that happens. His specialty was actually hunting leopards and lions, so it's a little ironic that it was ultimately an elephant that crushed him to death. What do you think? Did he deserve it or not? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Lions maul poachers. Our next story is another instance of karma, but in this one, an alleged rhino poacher is mauled to death by lions in South Africa. Actually, this didn't happen to one poacher, it happened to a whole group of poachers. This went down as they were supposedly trespassing in an African game reserve, according to the owner of the reserve. It's a place dedicated for camping and safaris for tourists. Apparently, the poachers snuck into the site with the intent of poaching some rhinoceroses. Some of the employees at the park were alerted at around 4:30 in the morning when the lions were making quite a bit of noise. However, it was not until the next day when the anti-poaching unit came across the remains of the poachers. There, the authorities also found a rifle, gloves, wire cutters, and a backpack with food. All the supplies were there that would be needed for killing a rhino and taking its horn. According to the authorities, the group of would-be poachers walked right into a group of 6 lions completely by accident and never made it back out. Since 2007, the poaching of rhinoceroses is up over 8,000%, as reported by ABC News. You'd think that as the animals near extinction and global condemnation over hunting increases, it would stop, but it's actually gotten worse. Tiger attacks circus trainer. You have to be a certain type of person to be a circus trainer, especially one that basically terrorizes a tiger all day for the entertainment of a bunch of hillbillies who come to watch. Back in 2016, a tiger finally got its revenge when it attacked its trainer. This happened at the Pensacola Interstate Fair when the animal finally had enough and struck back. The incident was caught on video, and it shows the circus trainer beating the animal in the face and striking it with a whip. And as the tiger became more and more panicked, it got more and more angry. The tiger then snatched up its trainer in its giant jaws and dragged him around in the cage. The tiger did eventually let go as another circus trainer stepped in to rescue his friend, but at least the guy finally got a little taste of his own medicine. Obviously, this is violating so many United States regulations, including the Animal Welfare Act. The fact that these types of circuses still exist is absolutely ridiculous, and the fact that people are actually paying money to go and watch somebody torture a tiger is kind of sick. But in the end, the tiger got its little taste of revenge. The unfortunate thing is that it probably won't be getting any more revenge after this incident. Indonesian singer killed by cobra. Here is another story about a performer being attacked by a very dangerous animal. An Indonesian singer famous for performing with live and deadly snakes finally performed her last song when the king cobra she had on stage took a bite out of her. You might say the king cobra was sick and tired of working for nothing. It took its deadly revenge on its owner and probably didn't think too much of it. The performer's name was Irma Bule, and if you live in the English world you probably have no idea who she was, but she was super famous in the Southeast Asian scene. She was only 29 when the snake chomped down, and in Indonesia it's apparently not illegal to perform with deadly animals on stage, and the performer used it as a gimmick to pick up more and more fans. But in 2016, in the middle of her second song of the night, Irma stepped on the snake's tail, and according to the local Indonesian news outlet, the snake bit her immediately right on the thigh. A bite from a king cobra is basically guaranteed death. These snakes grow to be around 18 feet long and are incredibly venomous. The amount of neurotoxin delivered in a single bite is enough to kill 20 people, and that's exactly what happened to Irma Bule. She did have anti-venom on hand, but apparently she kept on singing for 45 minutes after being bitten. This is because she didn't even notice she had been bit. Then the effect of the bite took hold. She vomited, had a seizure, and died. Elephant revenge attacks. Elephant revenge is nothing new. Elephants are smart, they have complicated social structures, and they appreciate a good revenge attack. Because elephants never forget, they have a particular thirst for vengeance unlike any other animal. Not only do elephants never forget, but they never forgive either. As reported by the Daily Mail, when an elephant was struck by a passenger train, the grieving herd then went out on a rampage and attacked some villages nearby to where their friend was hit by the train. This happened in India back in 2013 near the small village of Matari. The elephant was struck by the Kolkata-Delhi Express and died. The next night, the elephants tried to return to the spot near the railway where their friend was killed, but the local villagers kept them back by attacking them with firecrackers and making loud noises. But the night after that, the elephants hit back hard on another village where they damaged a whole bunch of houses and tried to destroy everything they could find. In the end, a specialist squad had to be sent in, and they were able to drive the herd out of the area before they could kill anybody. But at least the elephants got a little bit of revenge. Poacher eaten by lions. We talked about a gang of poachers being mauled to death by lions, and now we have another very similar story, but it has a unique twist. As reported by CNN, a rhino poacher in 2019 was killed by an elephant in Kruger National Park in South Africa, then later eaten by lions. The only thing left of him when authorities arrived was a skull and a pair of trousers. The incident allegedly happened after the man entered the park with 4 other people intent on poaching a rhino. Then an elephant suddenly attacked the poacher, killed him, and drove off the rest of the poachers. While this is a pretty good story of an elephant defending all the animals in the park, what happened after is actually pretty grisly. The man's family were notified of his death, and then a search party was sent out to try and find his body, but none of the rangers could find it. It wasn't until much later that they found just a handful of his remains. The authorities believe a pride of lions found the body and did what lions do best. And that's what some might call the circle of life. Wounded elk gets revenge. In Oregon, a wounded elk ended its life with the bittersweet taste of revenge. This happened in Tillamook County after an elk was shot and wounded with an arrow. A 66-year-old man had been archery hunting in the evening when his arrow hit the bull elk and wounded it, but because it was so late, the archer couldn't find the elk to finish it off. It wasn't until the next morning that he went to look for the elk. He found it at around 9 o'clock and tried to finish it off with his bow. But alas, he was too slow. The elk literally gored him with its antlers, and the man died shortly after from his injuries. The elk also died later that day, and according to an Oregon news source, its meat was donated to the local county jail. Dogs ruin car. This is probably the best story on the list, and I should start it from the beginning. First of all, the story comes to us from China. A man kicked a dog because it was sitting in his usual spot when he pulled his car into his building's parking lot. To get the dog out of the way, the man gave it a swift kick. When he returned the next morning, the man found that his car had been absolutely ruined. There were bite marks all over it, along with lots of scratches and other artificial damage. The driver of the car only discovered what happened after he found out that his neighbor had captured the attack on camera. You can see in the photos that the dog came back later with his friends and they had a free-for-all on the guy's car. This goes to show that dogs remember, and they also take revenge. It also shows that you should never trust your neighbor who sits there taking pictures of wild dogs while they rip apart your car rather than getting out and shooing them away. Wild boar seeks revenge. Wild boars may look kind of harmless. They're basically just shaggy pigs. However, wild boars have a mean streak. A story from 2015 takes us back to when a hunter bled to death after a wild boar got its revenge in the north of Spain. The local police called it an unfortunate accident, but there's no denying what it really was: pure cold-blooded revenge. It all happened after the hunter shot the boar rather than walking down to the grocery store and just buying some food. After he shot the animal, the hunting dogs went in to surround it, and as the man got close to finish the job, the boar charged and gored him right in the leg. This is kinda like what happened with the man and the elk in the other story. And much like that same incident, this man died from blood loss. He was taken by helicopter to the nearest hospital, but did not make it. And sadly, neither did the boar. Which animal revenge attack do you think was the most warranted? From mermaids spotted in World War II, plus an African construction site put on hold due to mermaid attacks, here are 10 of the most legit mermaid sightings and stories. 1943 Key Islands Mermaid. Starting our wild mermaid tales today is the 1943 incident in which Japanese soldiers allegedly spotted a mermaid in the middle of World War II. This happened at the Key Islands in Indonesia, a place with white sand beaches and gorgeous scenery. The Japanese soldiers were stationed with a surveillance team on a small island in the region when they supposedly saw strange creatures in the water that had the limbs and faces of a human, but the features of a carp. The Japanese soldiers also claimed that the creatures had pink skin and spines that stuck out of their heads. But unlike traditional mermaids, these beings did not have fishtails. By the way that the Japanese described it, it sounded like they saw the thing from the Black Lagoon. So were they beautiful mermaids or disturbing sea monsters? It's unclear, but the truth must be out there somewhere. It's possible that they were strange fish covered in coral or barnacles, maybe even a narwhal. Scientists never really found out the real answers. Apparently, soldiers would see these weird creatures cavorting near beaches and lagoons mostly in the night. They also witnessed them on the beaches at dusk, but the supposed mermaids would then quickly sprint into the water and dive below the waves when spotted. So far as the story goes, even the local villagers knew all about the human fish creatures. They called them orang ikan. But whether these freaky fishermen were real or not is anyone's guess. Israeli mermaids. As recently as 2009, mermaids have been spotted in Israel, in specifics, the small beach town of Kiryat Yam. According to Live Science, people reported seeing a mermaid at dusk, and the mermaid would perform tricks for locals and tourists. This mermaid was supposedly a young woman with the bottom half of a fish. She was first spotted sunbathing, but when she got caught, the mermaid leapt to her feet and disappeared into the ocean. And while you might think this is just total nonsense, the sighting was not isolated. Hundreds of people came forward in Kiryat Yam claiming that they too saw the mermaid. The mermaid became so popular that the town council offered a $1 million reward for any evidence that the creature really did exist. It should not come as a surprise to you that as of now, over 10 years later, nobody has yet to earn that $1 million. What happened in 2009 was probably a bunch of crazy stories feeding off of other crazy stories and people getting way too excited. What's the most striking example you have ever witnessed of someone making up a rumor and getting others to believe it? Was it gossip in grade school? Was it a religious cult or some so-called mystic or shaman? Let me know what happened and whether or not you believed it. Then remember, if you liked this video, you should definitely subscribe to keep up with all the great videos here on Talltanic. Canadian Mermaid. Our next story takes us to Canada to June 1967, British Columbia. This was the month that a mermaid was apparently spotted hanging out on the shore of Main Island. A whole group of people on a ferry claimed that they witnessed a blonde woman sitting on the shore. She was topless, gorgeous, had long blonde hair, and the tail of a porpoise. Apparently, she was even snacking on some raw salmon. Unlike most sightings, this one happened in a group, and someone even managed to take a picture. Is the picture legit? It depends who you ask. Many would claim it's a total fabrication or an outright hoax, but some people would call it real evidence. The mermaid was seen again a week later, and after the locals got excited. Just like with the reward for $1 million in Israel from 2009, the local town newspaper put out a $25,000 reward for anyone who could catch the mermaid. There were arrangements made for the mermaid to have a place to stay when she was found, and the townsfolk promised to make her feel very much at home. But she clearly did not hear them because she never showed up. Of course, the whole thing was probably nonsense, but that has not stopped some of the people who still live in the small Canadian region from claiming mermaids live in their waters. Mermaids halt construction. In 2012, workers in Zimbabwe were scared away from their construction site because of an angry mermaid. This happened while workers were trying to complete the construction of 2 dams. According to the ridiculous story from the Daily Mail, the mermaid legitimately harassed workers while they tried to complete their duties. In Zimbabwe, mermaids are known as mamba muntu, and since the local workers grew up on folklore and mythology, they wholeheartedly believed the appearance of the mermaid was a horrible omen and that the dam should not be finished. In a completely unbelievable reaction, the local council hired white workers to continue building the dam so that they wouldn't be scared away by a supposed mermaid. But much to everyone's surprise, the white workers also left the construction site and vowed never to return because the river mermaid was being so incredibly rude to them. The local council members ended up needing to perform a special ritual to cleanse the development of the dam and appease the mermaid. So what do you think? Was there really an angry mermaid wreaking havoc on the workers, or was it all just superstition and paranoia? This seems like a bizarre instance of some strange people quarreling and scaring away the workers, but multiple teams of employees walked off the job. The whole thing is totally strange and bewildering. Mermaids can be black. Believe it or not, mermaids can be black too. We often see mermaids depicted as white-skinned with colorful hair. I'm thinking of the famous lead character, Ariel, from Disney's Little Mermaid movie. She is an iconic mermaid and likely helped shape people's perceptions of what mermaids look like. But in most folklore, this isn't actually the case. Remember the huge issue back in 2019 after Disney announced that they would have Halle Berry play Ariel in a live-action remake of The Little Mermaid? If you don't remember, there was a huge racially charged uproar about it. But the truth is that there are mermaids in a lot of different cultures, and guess what? Most of them are not white. There are water elementals from Africa, beings that are half serpent and half human. There is also the deity Orish from West Africa, who is often depicted as being a mermaid. The Aboriginal people in Australia have stories of mermaids, none of which are very white, and even in India there are half serpent, half human creatures that look a whole lot like mermaids. Don't forget the stories and folklore from the Caribbean, from Chinese mythology, and from Japan. There are stories about mermaids from almost everywhere on Earth, and the truth is that most of them have pretty dark skin. So think about that the next time you're trying to imagine what a mermaid would look like. The truth might surprise you because mermaids are as diverse as human beings. Plus, they have fishtails, so it's hard to focus on something as superficial as the color of their skin, right? The South African Kimon. In South Africa, there is a legendary mermaid creature known as the kimon. And in 2008, it was making big waves in local news. It all went down when a group of friends camping near a river heard a loud splash followed by some banging. After a bit of investigation, the group apparently found a woman in the river. She was pale white, had long black hair, and kind of looked to be glowing, but she also had piercing red eyes. The mermaid creature cried out, then vanished into the river. Of course, this could have just been one big group hallucination, then again, it could have been real. Some people in South Africa are extremely afraid of the legendary kimon. She is known for pulling people under the water and trapping them there forever. I suspect that the truth is that this monster is a combination of stories of sea serpents, hippopotamus, and maybe even crazy loners who live in the river and scare people off with threatening nighttime activities. A real mermaid is hard to believe. The Scottish Mermaid. Scotland has a long history of monsters, legends, and mysteries. They also have a lot of mermaids in their folklore. There is a story from the 1800s in which a mermaid was apparently killed by some people out in the Hebrides. It all started when a woman found a mermaid while cutting seaweed near the shore. The woman screamed for help, and a bunch of people from nearby rushed into the water after the mermaid. One of them threw a stone at the mermaid, then she disappeared under the water, but a few days later the mermaid corpse supposedly washed up on shore. The mermaid was small, pale, and had the tail of a fish, but without any scales. The story continues with the sheriff giving the mermaid a proper burial, but the grave of this mermaid has yet to be found in modern times. Some say that the grave washed out to shore, and others think it's just a silly legend. Still, there is the slimmest chance that a grave from somewhere between 1820 and 1830 is hidden somewhere on the island. The person who finds it would instantly become world famous, that's for sure. It might be worth searching around that part of Scotland to try to find the truth if treasure hunting is your passion. Mermaid Bones. In 2014, there was an apparent skeleton found on the east coast of South Island in New Zealand of a legendary mermaid. It was allegedly found by a crew of fishermen from Papua New Guinea. 7 fishermen thought they saw a female corpse in the sand from their boat, and they alerted the New Zealand Coast Guard. The Coast Guard got some help by the federal police since they thought they were going to find a dead body. But after the authorities went to the location, they found the skeletal remains of something that was definitely not a human. It looked like a mermaid. Apparently, the authorities actually tried to get some assistance from forensic experts from the University of Auckland to identify the remains that they found. Obviously, the legitimate discovery of a humanoid sea creature would flip the world on its head, but as of yet, there has been no official confirmation, and in fact, the whole story could just be a great big hoax. On the other hand, the authorities could have taken the remains of the mermaid and someone or something made it disappear before the story could be verified. The Orne Mermaid. Our next story comes again from Scotland, this time from Newark Bay in the late 1800s. There were multiple mermaid sightings in the year 1890, and the legend of the Dearness Mermaid was born. This particular mermaid was not very good looking. The people who came forward claiming that they saw her described a humanoid creature at least 7 feet, 2 meters tall, with pale skin and black hair. She apparently crawled onto rocks using her arms, then would slide down into the waves with her fishtail. Of course, all the witnesses saw her from a great distance, so it very well could have just been a very tall woman swimming in the ocean. What's really interesting about this story is that all the witnesses reported seeing her only around 1890. In the following years, there were no sightings at all. It seemed like the mermaid vanished back into the murky depths, never to return. Could it have just been a curious swimmer? Could it have been an oddly human-looking whale? Or was it indeed a mermaid just coming up to say hello? Manatee or mermaid? This is probably the most ridiculous story on the list. The fact that anyone would confuse a mermaid with a manatee or the other way around is purely ridiculous, yet all the same time, sailors used to apparently mistake fat, happy manatees for legendary mermaids. The place where this happened the most, unsurprisingly, was off the coast of Florida. The legends say that when the ancient mariners were first sailing those waters and exploring the Caribbean, they would see manatees near the surface of the water and assume that they were mystical mermaids. The flipper might make a bit of sense. If you only saw the bottom half of the manatee, you might think it was a fat, gray-colored mermaid, but it is still pretty ridiculous. The most nonsensical example is Christopher Columbus, who according to History.com wrote in his ship's log back in 1493 that he encountered 3 mermaids in the water around the island of Hispaniola. He was apparently upset that the mermaids that he saw were not as beautiful as the stories he had heard. Columbus thought the mermaids were in fact ugly and way too masculine. And that makes sense considering they weren't mermaids at all and were probably sea cows. Christopher Columbus was obviously not the brightest bulb in the box. Do you believe in mermaids? From a misplaced porpoise to a dead mermaid, and even a real-life sharknado unlike anything you've ever seen, here are 10 strange sea creatures discovered after tsunamis. The blue jellyfish. Jellyfish being blue isn't that big of a surprise. However, a blue button jellyfish turning up on the shores of New Jersey is quite the event. This particular jellyfish was discovered by a woman while she walked along the shore with her young son and 2 dogs. She spotted the odd jellyfish right away sitting in the sand near the water, and it was unlike any jellyfish that she had ever seen before. The blue button jellyfish is so blue it's almost unreal. In this instance, the jellyfish wasn't alone either. There were several of them all clustered together. According to a marine biologist and expert on jellyfish, this unique animal does not belong anywhere near New Jersey. Blue button jellyfish live down near Florida and in the tropics. She believes the weird creatures were likely pushed all the way to New Jersey after Hurricane Florence disturbed the waters. This is just another case of extreme weather pushing sea creatures far away from home all the way to distant shores. Alien fish. Imagine walking down the beach and finding that an alien had washed up on shore. That's exactly what happened to a resident of New Zealand back in 2018. Just minding their business and suddenly they discovered this bizarre creature. It was a skeleton with claws and what appeared to be wings. It also appeared to have very sharp fangs in its mouth. To make things even stranger, the alien fish was discovered after a large storm just passed by, and it was discovered in a very strange part of the beach, a part that's really rocky and has a large drop off to the shore. That means it would have been impossible for the creature to swim to the point where it was found. In all likelihood, it was the storm that tossed it onto the beach, but the even stranger part is that nobody was really sure what the creature was at first. It was a complete mystery until a doctor identified the photo online as being a New Zealand rough skate, which is basically a flat shark with a skeleton made out of cartilage. These weird fish are often caught by commercial fishermen who then sell their wings to be eaten. And even though the creature looks like it has legs, it actually does not. What appear to be legs are actually claspers, which the fish uses for mating with a female. Out of all the creatures that have washed up on shore after a tsunami or a big storm, this is one of the strangest. Mystery dead thing. In Indonesia, a giant 50-foot blob washed up on shore in 2017 and nobody even knew what it was. This happened in Hulong Beach, and there's no denying that whatever the blob was, it was enormous. It was also very dead when it was found. The thing was just sitting near the shore in the water, which had turned red by the way, rotting away in a big slop of tissue and meat. Not only was the mystery creature extremely long, but it was also estimated to weigh at least 35 tons. That would make it over 4 times heavier than a standard elephant. What do you think it was? Let me know in the comments below. Locals initially identified the strange creature as a giant squid. However, an employee of the local Natural History Museum said that there are no records of giant squids anywhere near Indonesia. This means that it could have been a whale in an advanced state of decomposition, but it was so horribly decayed that nobody really knew for sure. Unfortunately, the creature decayed too fast and nobody was overly interested, and so it ended up being a mystery that was never solved. Whether the creature washed up after a storm out at sea or because of one of the many tsunamis constantly hitting Indonesia, it's really anyone's guess. Attack of the Blobs. In 2016, California was under siege by an army of strange sea critters. This happened when thousands of weird pink blobs started showing up on Huntington Beach. According to the local reports, they were very squishy and kind of looked like giant fish eggs. They were basically gelatinous pods and nobody knew where they came from, and truth be told, they looked pretty disgusting. They almost looked like water balloons filled with plasma, like weird deformed jellyfish. An expert from the University of California, Irvine, finally came forward after photos of the blobs surfaced online and claimed that they were probably sea cucumbers. They were likely already on Huntington Beach, only hiding under the sand. But after a recent storm in the area shifted the sand and exposed the creatures, it seemed that they had washed up out of nowhere. Within just a few days, locals reported that the sea cucumbers had disappeared entirely. Another professor from the University of California, Irvine, later confirmed the creatures were indeed sea cucumbers and that they had indeed been under the sand the entire time, right under everyone's feet. Sea cucumbers are weird marine animals typically found on the bottom of the sea floor. An alien dock. The biggest displacement of sea life in recent memory happened after the destructive tsunami that hit Japan back in 2011. To this day, strange things are still being found washed up on shore from that powerful event. One of the weirdest things to be found was a dock that had washed ashore during a storm back in 2012. This happened at a beach in Newport, Oregon. And the dock did not contain just one creature, it actually had around 300 marine species, all of them attached to the dock. The object itself weighed around 188 tons, was completely coated in seaweed, and contained sea stars, barnacles, crabs, and mussels. After the dock was discovered, it was soon revealed that it actually came from a small city in Japan that was directly hit by the mega tsunami back in 2011. The dock had drifted through the Pacific Ocean for a full 15 months, gradually collecting all kinds of marine creatures before it eventually landed in Oregon. According to The Verge, this dock is only one of hundreds of different pieces of debris that have washed ashore all across Hawaii and the West Coast, ranging from Alaska to California. The 300 species attached to the dock are only some that have made it to the shores of the US after the tsunami. According to the US Fish and Wildlife Service, they estimate that the invasive species carried across the ocean and landing on the western shores cost the United States roughly $120 billion in damages every year. The freak fish. After the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, a lot of reports started coming in of all kinds of bizarre sea creatures washed up on shore. Literally dozens of photos appeared online of the most horrible creatures imaginable. However, some of these photos are a little less real than others. The problem was that after the tsunami, any weird or unusual photograph ended up being attributed to the natural disaster. Some of the fish, like the blobfish, a weird eel-squid hybrid, and even a fish that looks like a mutated platypus, were all blamed on the single tsunami. And in fact, the exact same set of creepy photos resurfaced after the next big tsunami in 2011. The sad truth is that most of these images don't have anything to do with any tsunami. They are definitely weird and horrendous sea creatures, and almost all of them really do exist, but don't believe everything you see on the internet. Porpus and rice paddy. How would you like to be swimming in the ocean one moment and then dumped in the middle of a rice paddy the next? That's exactly what happened to one unfortunate sea creature back in 2011. A poor porpoise was not just washed up on shore, it was literally thrown into a rice paddy very far inland in Japan. This happened after the deadly tsunami in 2011, but thankfully rescuers very quickly found the baby porpoise and brought it back to the ocean where it belonged. If you're wondering exactly how far the sea creature was tossed, it was found over 1 mile from the shore a full week after the disaster. This is according to the local Japanese news source in Sendai. The porpoise was actually found by someone just passing by. They were shocked to see that the animal was actually okay. It was literally just splashing around in the water of the rice paddy. Luckily, it was only about 3 feet long and managed to survive the trip back to the ocean. A typical finless porpoise will grow to be around 5 feet long. These animals are native to most of coastal Asia. Sharknado. As if sharks and storms weren't scary enough already, now we have a real-life Sharknado. This happened in New South Wales in Australia. After a brutal cyclone caused tremendous damage with its 120 miles per hour winds, a killer shark was found sitting on the beach completely displaced. Imagine if you had been standing on that beach when the giant shark was thrown through the air by the cyclone. You would literally have been a victim of a Sharknado. The cyclone picked up the shark, threw it through the air, and it landed in the sand. But it could have definitely landed straight on someone's head. Luckily it didn't. The shark didn't actually survive the ordeal, which sucks for the poor guy, but good thing nobody was killed by the giant storm. Imagine if that shark had landed on someone's house or car. I just keep thinking about all the possibilities. Lost Mermaid. Here is one that will give you nightmares. A man named Paul Jones posted a series of photographs from Norfolk Beach in the United Kingdom a while ago of what appeared to be a mermaid dead and rotten washed up on the shore. The creature in the photos had a very small tail and was definitely the ugliest mermaid you have ever seen in your life. It looked like a burn victim with a fin. People on social media were quick to point out the impossibility of the photographs. Remember, this was in 2016, before the Earth was flat. In any case, Paul Jones was likely the creator of the mermaid and was likely the one who put it there. It probably had nothing to do with a storm or a tsunami. Jones is actually a creator of models and has made a lot of fish-themed art pieces. But still, imagine finding that on your own during a nice romantic walk on the beach. You'd have a heart attack. Giant oarfish. Last on the list is the giant oarfish. The giant oarfish is the harbinger of death and destruction, supposedly a warning sign of an incoming earthquake and tsunami. In 2017, a massive oarfish washed up on shore in the Philippines, sparking panic and concern that there would be an earthquake in the coming days. Of course, this is not just paranoia. Giant oarfish are often found right before a big natural disaster. One was found in the Philippines on a beach in Agusan del Norte, just days before a monstrous earthquake devastated the island in February of 2017, just weeks before this newest story. It's not only in the Philippines that they believe the legend of the oarfish either. The Japanese have long believed that oarfish are actually messengers from the sea god's palace warning people of imminent disaster. And there might actually be something to this legend. The thing is that oarfish live around 3,000 feet under the ocean and are one of the biggest fish in the entire world, but they very rarely make it to the surface. According to a report from Daily Mail, many scientists think that oarfish actually wash ashore because of the strong currents that precede earthquakes. And you know what happens when an earthquake strikes out at sea? A massive and destructive tsunami follows. From the possible location of Noah's Ark to a Roman baby disposal that proves the Romans were actual savages, plus the origin of apples, here are 10 amazing archaeological discoveries. Noah's Ark found. Topping off today's list of amazing archaeological discoveries is Noah's Ark. That's right, I'm talking about the infamous Ark from the Bible. According to a recent article from The Sun, experts believe they have snapped underground images of what could be Noah's Ark in eastern Turkey. The images in question appear to show something that could be a boat buried beneath rock near some mountains. As you can imagine, skeptics are not convinced, and to be quite honest, the photos really do just look like a ship-shaped rock. But a lot of other people are 100% behind the find. The pictures of the supposed ark were obtained by sending electrical signals underground using cables, and it's true it does kinda look like a giant boat in the collected images. According to the legend, Noah is the guy who loaded 2 of every animal onto a giant ark in the early chapters of the Bible to save them all from apocalyptic flooding. And in the book of Genesis, eastern Turkey is in fact the region in which Noah's Ark eventually stops after the Great Flood. There are obviously a million things wrong with the legend if you want to look at it factually, but if there is indeed a massive boat hidden under the rock, it would be one heck of a phenomenal coincidence. Have you ever dug up something unique in your own backyard? Perhaps an old bullet casing or even an old gas can from decades ago? Some people might have even found something valuable. It can happen. There is often treasure in the most unexpected places. Let me know in the comments, then subscribe if you haven't already. More exciting videos are coming out every day and you won't want to miss them. The First Leper. Back in 2009, researchers discovered the very first case of leprosy. For those that don't know, leprosy is basically the zombie disease. We've pretty well eradicated it from the world, but for thousands of years it was a very terrible disease that caused horrible skin lesions all over the sufferer. Leprosy is now curable, but for most of human history, lepers were ostracized and forced out of their own communities. Now, scientists have the bones of the very first one, or at least it's the oldest known to us so far. The skeleton is 4,000 years old and it was found in India. A new study shows that it bears the earliest archaeological evidence of leprosy ever. Not only that, but it's the first evidence of the disease being in prehistoric India. It's giving scientists a bit of insight into how the nasty disease spread across early human history. It's now believed that the disease likely originated in Africa and then spread out of Africa around 40,000 years ago, where it eventually eclipsed the entire human population. This isn't really revolutionary science, but it's still impressive that they found such an old leper in India. Oh yeah, and they found it buried in Rajasthan. In Hindu tradition, the only people who are buried are outcasts, pregnant women, young children, victims of magic, victims of curses, and of course, lepers. Desert kites. Desert kites are not what they sound like. These are actually ancient stone structures from about 6,000 years ago that were found in the Middle East. They were named desert kites because they kinda look like kites, but in fact, these weird stone formations were used to funnel migrating gazelles into traps where they would then be killed and ultimately butchered. This is according to a new study discussed in National Geographic. One of the best examples of desert kites is at an archaeological site in northeastern Syria. There are stone walls constructed that funneled wild animals into giant killing pits. It's basically like building low walls to force animals to fall into a giant pit full of spikes. This is the Middle Eastern equivalent to the North American indigenous people driving buffalo off the edges of its cliffs. It's another very early example of mass killing strategies employed by the earliest humans. It may be some of the earliest evidence of the extirpation of large animals in the Middle East, even before the invention of firearms in the 20th century. Headless Vikings. Vikings just aren't that scary without their heads, but a pile made of Viking heads would be terrifying. A recent archaeological discovery in Britain has unveiled a massive burial pit full of executed Vikings. Roughly 50 skeletons were found inside of an old quarry pit in Dorset back in 2009 during the construction of a relief road. Every last skeleton has been decapitated, with all their bodies thrown inside shallow graves and all their heads piled up to the side. It's a pretty grisly image to look at now, even if it is just a bunch of skeletons. But just imagine what it would have looked like at the time of its creation with a giant pile of 50 heads. It's absolutely gruesome. According to the Vintage News, the individuals found inside the pit would have been executed at the side of the grave, stripped naked, then beheaded. This happened sometime between AD 910 and AD 1030, meaning it was only about 1,000 years ago. The Vikings were probably executed by the local Anglo-Saxons. Unfortunately, archaeologists don't currently know why it happened, what exactly went down, or any of the finer details, but it was very likely that the Vikings were captured during a raiding attempt. Saak Sayaman. Saak Sayaman is one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in Peru. It's believed that Saak Sayaman was constructed by the early pre-industrial Incans. It's a complex with 3-tiered walls and is considered one of the most complex marvels of engineering for its time. Some of the biggest blocks used to construct this ancient place fit together so tightly that the Incans did not even need to use mortar. They essentially crafted Lego blocks that fit together like a glove, but that's not the only reason Saak Sayaman is so impressive. Over the 3 sections of the remaining walls, you can see that some of these stones are of a preposterous size. It may not look that large in the photos, but it's positively huge. All the stones are square or rectangular, and there's absolutely no consistency to their exact dimension. It's as if each piece were carved custom to fit in a particular space inside the wall, which in itself would have required magnificent planning and engineering skills. Unfortunately, the rest of the complex, which could have been composed of towers, battlements, and who knows what else, was utterly destroyed by the Spanish when they conquered the nearby city of Cusco and began to basically destroy the indigenous culture of Peru like they did all over Latin America. Tomb of the Sunken Skulls. The Tomb of the Sunken Skulls is an absolute enigma. It all started a few years ago when archaeologists were excavating a prehistoric lake bed in Sweden. Of course, the lake bed was dry when they started excavating it. In any case, the archaeologists stumbled upon the foundations of an ancient stone structure sealed at the bottom of the lake. After a bit of digging, they unearthed the Tomb of Sunken Skulls. Inside the small structure, they found animal bones, stone tools, and 10 skulls that were 8,000 years old. It's unclear exactly what happened at the site, but an 11th skull was later found with fragments of one of the other skulls deliberately lodged inside of it. That is some pretty nasty stuff, but it gets even worse. Researchers believe that before the 11 people were thrown inside the tomb, their bodies were staked and then they were set on fire. Could this be the oldest example of mass killings of vampires? Or is it just another example of ancient savagery? Whatever it is, this is one nasty discovery. The origin of apples. How would you like to know where apples come from? As you probably know, before globalization and trade, certain plants, fruits, vegetables, and flowers only grew in their own personal part of the globe. Of course, now you can grow anything pretty much anywhere, but that was not always the case. If you've ever just kind of accepted that apples grow in your backyard because they're supposed to, you'd better listen up. Recent archaeological evidence is saying that apples actually began their long history in the mountains of Kazakhstan. This is one of the only places in the world that would have had apples growing naturally thousands of years ago. Apples may even have been one of the rare surviving plants after the last ice age. This new fossil evidence is also saying that apples can be traced back to the original Silk Road trading routes. It's likely that farmers cultivated them initially in Kazakhstan and then traded them along the Silk Road from east to west. This is how apples became extremely popular in China as well as Europe, and how they eventually made their way over to North America. Of course, this happened quite some time ago. Don't forget that Eve eats an apple in the Bible, while in the Arabian Nights, a magical apple is used to cure any illness. And even in Norse mythology, the golden apple can give a god immortality. There's no denying the special magic of the apple, and it's pretty cool to think that it all started in just a few hills of the sparsely populated country of Kazakhstan. Badger digs up medieval burial ground. When it comes to archaeological discoveries, we usually have archaeologists to thank, but this next story is all thanks to badgers. A badger living in the countryside of Germany recently uncovered an incredible 12th century burial ground all by itself. If that's not incredible enough already, the burial ground contained at least 2 Slavic warlords. It all started when 2 sculptors who lived in the area noticed the badger digging in a peculiar spot. The sculptors went to investigate and they saw a pelvic bone sticking out of the dirt. Later, a rare archaeological dig went down and a whole lot of very cool things were discovered. They found one of the warriors was buried with a double-edged sword and a huge bronze bowl at his feet. This type of bowl would have been used in ancient times to wash your hands before eating. This suggests that the man buried was part of the upper class. The same warrior was also adorned with an intricate belt buckle in the shape of the Omega symbol with a snake at each end. The warrior was incredibly well equipped, whoever exactly he was. Another grave uncovered at the site contained a woman with a coin in her mouth. According to some ancient religious beliefs, people who were buried with a coin in their mouth were able to pay the mythical ferryman to transport them across the river and into the world of the dead. Tomb of the Silver Dragons. The Tomb of the Silver Dragons was discovered in Mongolia. It's one of the most incredible archaeological discoveries ever found in the country. It was likely built for nobles of the Xiongnu Empire, which thrived at a time when nomadic people dominated the Eurasian steppes between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century AD. This empire constantly was at war with the Han Dynasty of China. To defend against this Mongolian menace, China eventually built the Great Wall. The Tomb of the Silver Dragons was excavated by a special team from the Ulaanbaatar University, and it was found to contain some very cool relics from that time period. There were wooden boxes filled with silver, jade belt hooks, and a particularly valuable pair of gilded silver dragons. There were actually 2 tombs discovered. The smaller tomb contained a man buried with his horse-drawn carriage, 15 severed horse heads, a sword decorated with jade, and 19 silver ornaments, all of which depicted a unicorn deity. The only thing researchers don't know is who exactly the tomb belonged to. Roman baby disposal. Baby disposal is not a pleasant topic, but it might have been quite a common thing back in the days of ancient Rome. An archaeologist named Ross Voss made a rather gruesome discovery while exploring the old seaport of Ashkelon in modern Israel. He was checking out the ruins of the city's sewer when he stumbled upon a bunch of small bones that he first thought belonged to a chicken. However, it soon became apparent that all these little bones belonged to babies, and they all dated back to the era of the Roman Empire. It's now considered to be the most significant mass grave of infants ever found on Earth, and unfortunately it could be proof that the ancient Romans were guilty of rampant baby killing. This is nothing new, as it's been a theory for quite some time. Archaeologists have always suspected that Romans did some pretty nasty stuff to their babies, but now we have the physical evidence. Even though the Romans were sophisticated in a lot of ways, they had some pretty backward ideas about childbirth. They were so detached from babies that they were able to simply throw them into the sewers or just leave them outside so that they would die of exposure. They felt literally no guilt about it because they didn't think it was a crime. Of course, it could also be just that the death was thought of as part of life, and dying wasn't as big of a deal back then. This particular baby disposal was found beneath an area known as an ancient red light district. Archaeologists theorize that when the ladies of the night became pregnant, they simply carried the baby to term and then disposed of them beneath the exact same place in which they were conceived, and this is why there were so many baby bones discovered in the sewer. Very sad, but absolutely true. Which of these discoveries is the most amazing or disturbing? From the most powerful snipers of World War II all the way to the newest and most advanced weapons coming out of Russia, including an undetectable super sniper, here are 10 of the most powerful and dangerous sniper rifles ever. Chevy TAC M200 Intervention Sniper Rifle. The Chevy TAC M200 Intervention is an intense long-range weapon that can do some serious damage. It looks mean too. This piece of weaponry is lightweight, compact, and one of the best snipers ever developed. Production began on the M200 back in 2001, and since then it has been used by militaries in Italy, Poland, Turkey, Singapore, and the UK. But it's not used by any ordinary army forces. This sniper is only used by elite military units, like the Polish Grom and the British SAS. There have even been some rumors that the US Navy SEALs got their hands on a few of these bad boys. As for the gun itself, it's a manual, bolt-action sniper rifle chambered to fit a specifically designed .408 round. The cartridge utilizes a streamlined bullet with an advanced design to fire with unparalleled accuracy. When using the M200 Intervention, a trained marksman can easily get their target at 6,000 feet. The bullet will even retain its supersonic velocity up to the point of impact, but despite how incredibly accurate the M200 is as a long-range weapon, it's not exactly that popular. This is likely because there aren't many missions in which soldiers need to be shooting targets from 6,000 feet. Ursus T5000 Sniper Rifle. The Ursus T5000 sniper rifle is the deadliest weapon you have never heard of. This highly advanced sniper rifle has reportedly been used by Russian sniper squadrons during the fighting in eastern Ukraine, with entire groups operating as long-range marksmen to hold a targeted area. This is devastating, as the Ursus T5000 is a weapon that, when placed in skilled hands, can have deadly results. This is a weapon that came about during the rapid modernization of the Russian armed forces in the late 2000s. It's a bolt-action sniper rifle that comes in a variety of different calibers, like .308 Winchester or .300 Winchester Magnum. These are calibers known for providing incredible accuracy at long distances. From just a few thousand yards away, a team of snipers can easily lock down an entire village or town, assuming they have a clean line of sight. From such a position, the snipers and their Ursus T5000 rifles can restrict all enemy movement and wait for artillery fire. This is a serious upgrade in Russian hardware. And now for number 8, but first let me know if you've ever used a rifle like these in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you are new here. Barrett M82 Sniper Rifle. For a long time, the M82 sniper rifle has been at the top of the pile. This weapon system revolutionized the field of military sniping nearly 40 years ago. The Barrett M82 was the first ever rifle to use a massive 50 caliber round. Before this rifle, the 50 caliber rounds were used primarily with heavy machine guns. Nobody actually believed that such a monstrous round could be fired with any kind of accuracy, never mind with the flawless precision of the M82. But of course, Ronnie Barrett in the 1980s designed, developed, and built the M82 anyway. The result was a ridiculously strong sniper rifle that could take out any target from at least 2,000 yards away. The original M82 was about 57 inches long, its barrel was 29 inches, and the entire weapon weighed around 28 pounds. But where the M82 really impressed was with its energy. It could easily shoot an M33.50 BMG bullet with a velocity of 2,750 FPS, delivering an unheard of 11,169 foot-pounds of energy. This is compared to the measly 1,330 foot-pounds of energy from a little 5.56 round. Suffice to say, military agents agencies all over the world were basically clawing over themselves to get their hands on the M82, and since then it has remained an extremely popular weapon in both pop culture, video games, and the field of combat. Accuracy International AW-50 Sniper Rifle. If you want a heavy-duty sniper rifle that can penetrate armor and rule the battlefield, you probably want the Accuracy International AW-50 anti-material rifle. This is an absolute beast of a weapon. In fact, it's in the same impressive league as other heavy battlefield rifles like the Barrett M82 that we just talked about. The big difference with the AW-50 is that it's designed specifically for engaging armored convoys. This sniper can blast through armor, through shielding, through brick walls, and all other manner of barrier at a whopping distance of over 1 mile away, or even more depending on your skill level as a marksman. And even though the AW-50 is a raw killing machine with brutal power, it's actually quite manageable to use with minimal rearwards or upwards movements between successive shots. However, this gun was only produced back in 1999 and it uses a manually actuated bolt action system. This means every shot needs to count as the operator must eject each shell casing and manually insert a new round into the firing chamber. Still, when shooting from up to 1.5 miles away, each shot had better count. L96A1 Sniper Rifle. The accuracy of the L96A1 sniper rifle from Accuracy International is legendary. This is the current preferred method of sniping for the British Army. The weapon comes featured with an adjustable butt, an adjustable bipod, and iron sights if you're feeling brave. But of course it also comes standard with a 6x42 Schmidt & Bender scope according to Military Factory. This weapon is a bit older, only coming to life in the middle of the 1980s, but that doesn't mean it can't do some serious damage. The weapon is designed to have pinpoint accuracy at around 2,000 feet while maintaining cover fire from over 3,500 feet away. This weapon is designed to fire a 7.62 by 52mm NATO cartridge from a 10-round mag. The muzzle velocity when firing a round is an incredible 2,790 feet per second, and if that feels a little too light duty for you, there is indeed a military version of this gun available that fires .50 caliber rounds. Springfield Model 1903. Let's take a step back in time for a second to the M1903 Springfield, the service rifle used by standard infantry units throughout World War I, World War II, and parts of the Korean War and Vietnam War. While the Springfield Model 1903 is certainly not the most powerful sniper today, considering it dates back to the late 1800s, it was the most powerful back then. After much trial and error and following what other countries at the time were doing, the USA eventually developed the 150 grain cartridge known as the .3006 and paired the cartridge with the American Mauser development rifle designed as the M1903. The rifle took on the name M1903 Springfield because of the armory where it was developed. Of course, throughout the years, many improvements were added to the M1903, even the Remington Arms Company tweaked things here and there. In 1929, there was a special target version of the gun manufactured that formally introduced a pistol grip in the design of the body. Muzzle velocity increased over time until it reached 2,800 feet per second. During World War II, it was tweaked into a sniper rifle capable of hitting a target from 2,500 yards off. It was used during the D-Day fighting at Normandy, but ultimately, this legendary sniper rifle exited military service in 1974 after nearly 100 years of triumphs. Mosen Nagant Model 1891/30 Sniper Rifle. Let's move over to the Russians' earliest sniper rifle. The Mosen Nagant Model 1891 bolt-action rifle was the preferred weapon by the Soviets during World War II. The weapon first entered Russian service in 1892, where it was used standard in the Russo-Japanese War and World War I. Then it was improved and modified by the Red Army during the 1930s. Gunsmiths managed to add a telescopic sight, allowing soldiers to hit targets up to around 2,000 feet away, but the quality still was not the best, and sometimes the wooden stocks would warp during changes in the weather. But despite its shortcomings, this rifle was rugged and accurate. In the hands of the Russians, it was a real murder machine, and even though the Soviets did develop the Tokarev SVT-40 for use as a sniper rifle, the Mosen Nagant Model 1891 was still better. It remained in use until replaced by the Dragunov SVD in 1963, according to HistoryNet. MTS-116M Silent Sniper Rifle. Moving on with the Russians, back in 2018 they developed the world's first silent sniper rifle and displayed it at the Russia's Army Expo. The MTS-116M suppressed sniper rifle is a real advancement in weapons technology. According to Popular Mechanics, it's designed specifically to hide the noise and the muzzle flash, making operators pretty much invisible while firing. This is absolutely one of the deadliest and most advanced sniper rifles ever created. The MTS-116M has been around for at least 25 years, offering a range of over 2,300 feet to accurately hit a target. But this newer version adds a new depth to the fighting. Since most firefights involve shooting at flashes and sounds, if your team does not produce these flashes or sounds, the enemy has nothing to fire back at. Using these snipers can turn a whole squadron of trained fighters into ghosts, especially with the right cover. They are most widely used in modern irregular warfare like insurgencies inside of Middle Eastern countries, specifically Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. This is because in urban situations, firing the MTS-116M is virtually undetectable. It makes this one of the best modern weapons of war. The ZK-ZM500 laser rifle. When you think about the weapons of the future, you probably think laser weapons. Well, guess what? China supposedly has a destructive laser rifle that has a sniping capability of up to 0.5 miles in range. The weapon is known as the ZK-ZM500, and it consists of a laser and a lithium battery. It was reportedly developed by the Xi'an Institute of Optics and Precision Mechanics. The rifle only weighs about 6 pounds, it has a full range of 2,600 feet, and it uses its lithium battery to fire off a maximum of 1,000 shots on a single charge. However, it's not that deadly. The laser can supposedly scar human tissue or ignite clothing, but it can't blow a hole in you just yet. The main use is likely for crowd control, as the laser could be used to sweep across a crowd of protesters and cause them intense pain rather than lighting them on fire. This is just the first step to a world ruled by laser warfare. Russian Super Sniper T-5000. The new Russian T-5000 is a force to be reckoned with. This weapon is part of a new generation of warfare far more advanced than anything any other country has come up with. The T-5000 uses .388 Magnum ammo to deliver 5,000 foot-pounds of energy. This is about double what the previous Dragunov snipers could accomplish. Production began in 2011 using better materials and better optics to drastically improve quality. Whereas with most snipers an operator can be relatively accurate from 2,000 yards, the T-5000 allows operators to be deadly accurate at the same distance. This means that any skilled marksman can pretty much always hit their target at 2,000 yards. So far, it's been reported by Popular Mechanics that the weapon has been used only in Iraq and Ukraine, and is being utilized primarily by the Russian Army and the Russian Federal Security Service, which used to be the KGB. A giant boat, the Batmobile, and a pair of failed Soviet space shuttles are just some of the 10 coolest abandoned vehicles we're about to look at. The World Discoverer. First on the list for today of the coolest abandoned vehicles ever is the World Discoverer. This ocean liner has been sitting on its side half sunk ever since 2000. It was once a cruise ship that went all across the world, navigating the 8,000 miles of the Northwest Passage with ease. But after an unfortunate meeting with an uncharted reef, the boat met its end. Everyone on board was safely evacuated, but the ship did not make it when the captain ran it aground at Roderick Bay in the Solomon Islands. To this day, nobody has been able to get the ship off the reef, and now it's become a tourist destination. A few salvage companies have tried to retrieve the ship, but unfortunately it's already being ransacked by locals and is basically useless. Plus, all the tidal activity has damaged the structure beyond repair, and all the rusting makes it nothing but a large pile of garbage. To retrieve the vessel now would be way more trouble than it's worth, and so the ship will likely remain slowly crumbling into the ocean as an oddly beautiful display in this tropical place. Porsche 911 race car. Nobody should ever let a Porsche 911 race car fall into such disrepair. This particular vehicle is a 1987 Porsche 911 race car that seems to have been sitting for an excruciatingly long time and is in desperate need of a full restoration. As of 2020, the car was put on sale on the Facebook Marketplace for only $12,500. The dealership selling this car told Road & Track that it was found sitting at a ranch outside of Houston completely abandoned. Alongside the Porsche was a 2008 911 GT3 Cup car. From the photo evidence, it appears that the Porsche was once a NASA club racer before it was forgotten and left to dry in the hot Texas sun. The car is obviously not in great shape. with tons of rust clearly visible in the photos, but the engine still appears to be intact, which could mean that with enough money, the Porsche could be restored to its former glory. The car still has a roll cage, it still has the harnesses, and it still has an aftermarket tachometer. Nonetheless, this wouldn't be an easy project to undertake. It's just a sad sight to see such a classic race car sitting in such disrepair and being sold for such a small price. The ultimate airplane boneyard. Let's take a look at the ultimate airplane boneyard. According to a report from ABC News, the largest airplane graveyard on the planet is located in Tucson, Arizona. Popularly known as the Boneyard, this airplane graveyard is formally known as the 309th AMARG, or Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group. The facility is used to store all the excess military and government aircrafts. That means that in this graveyard you can find abandoned jets, helicopters, planes, and even space shuttles all belonging to the Air Force, the Navy, the Coast Guard, NASA, and the Marine Corps. The site is literally filled with the coolest aircrafts in the world, all of them completely left to collect nothing but dust. There are apparently 500 people employed at the Boneyard, tasked with taking care of the over 4,000 abandoned aircraft that make the Boneyard their permanent residence. The good news is that you can actually visit this place. Check out the abandoned YC-15, the Japanese MH-53E helicopter, and much more. Toyota Supra. Sitting abandoned in Japan is a completely genuine 1999 Toyota Supra GT500 JGTC race car. As reported by Top Gear, the car has been abandoned for at least 15 years and has turned into the most expensive flower bed in the world. It can be found sitting outside of a local repair shop crowded with flowers as it gradually rusts away. Apparently, after the '99 racing season, nobody wanted this car. It was too complex to run, too expensive to own, and too much of a burden. So the owners of the small repair shop managed to pick it up for free. Ever since, they have been using it to catch the eye of potential customers outside their main office. It has sat undisturbed for almost 2 decades. The tires are flat, the paint is faded, and the rust has set in nicely. Interestingly enough, even though the small garage has been approached several times over the years by people who wanted to buy the car, with some of them offering ridiculous amounts of money, they always refused to sell it. It turns out that the small family who got this amazing piece of racing memorabilia for free is happier having it as an ornament in their yard than as money in their bank account. Abandoned naval submarine. It doesn't get much cooler than finding an abandoned naval submarine. Well, a Dutch urban explorer named Bob visited a submarine abandoned by Portugal's Navy. Bob spent 12 hours inside the submarine filming his claustrophobic adventure to upload online. He even took a nap in one of the narrow bunks. The vehicle has been sitting moored at a naval base in Lisbon for somewhere around 10 years now, but even though it's abandoned, it's still filled with all kinds of cool stuff. First, Bob climbed down the access hatch in the middle of the night after sneaking into the facility, and then he explored all the cool gadgets and dials inside the vessel. Among the cool artifacts discovered were chess pieces and the famous game Mastermind. It looks like the people who worked on the submarine needed exciting ways to spend their time. The submarine's proper name is the Delphin, and in its prime it cruised the waters armed with 12 torpedoes and a crew of at least 50 people. But the Delphin's usefulness ran out in the 1990s, and for over a decade it has been abandoned and left to rot. Abandoned yacht. Staying in Europe, let's head over to the coast of Albania. According to the local media there, authorities discovered an abandoned yacht that they believe was being used for the smuggling of illegal drugs. The yacht had a Slovenian flag on it and was named Taipan. The authorities figured that the owner was an Italian national, but when they found the boat, there was nobody on board. Its anchors were deployed, and the police kept the yacht under strict observation to see if anyone would show up so that they could arrest them. They suspected the boat had been used for drug smuggling, mostly because a speedboat was also found nearby. It's likely that the drugs were taken off the yacht and then transported to land using a speedboat. This is quite often how illegal substances get into Europe, although why the boat was abandoned is anybody's guess. Oddly enough, this is quite similar to an incident that happened in 2019 when a Turkish national abandoned his boat in the same area. The Turkish fella in question has yet to be apprehended. Russian tanks on Shikotan Island. On a small island that once belonged to Japan, there is a small platoon of armored tanks slowly disappearing into the grass. The island is known as Shikotan Island, and the tanks have been abandoned since the early 90s when the Soviet Union came undone. Back in the 1940s, the island belonged to Japan. It was where Japanese ships assembled for the secret operation to attack Pearl Harbor. Later on, between 1943 and 1945, Japan bolstered their strength on the islands only to have American attacks tie down their forces in the north. After the Soviet Union declared war on Japan in 1945, Russian forces landed on the islands and took them over. The Japanese lost, and in 1951, they gave up the islands to Russia and have yet to get them back. The Batmobile. If you ever wondered what happened to the Batmobile after the Dark Knight movies finished being made, you simply need to look to Dubai. The original and authentic Batmobile from the Chris Nolan movies is currently sitting in a garage in Dubai. Apparently, the two fellas who found it thought it didn't even look remotely as cool as it did on the screen. What happened was that after the movies finished filming, a man from Dubai purchased the vehicle for just shy of $1 million from Hollywood. And while it's not exactly abandoned, it's not exactly in great shape either. It had to be decommissioned in the United States before it was sent across the planet, which means all the systems that made it work had to be taken out. The reason that the Batmobile was purchased at all is apparently because the owner is planning to put all the original systems back in so that the vehicle can be driven, and the guy is also working on a fire-breathing exhaust system so that the vehicle can spit flames just like it did in the movie. For now though, the car is sitting unused in a rich guy's garage. Interestingly enough, Christopher Nolan actually requested this specific Batmobile to be designed based on his idea. It was constructed in the United Kingdom with at least 7 or 8 prototypes being dismissed before the final version was put into the film. Soviet space shuttles. Take a trip to Kazakhstan and you could find 2 abandoned Soviet space shuttles. It's one thing to find an abandoned airplane or an abandoned tank, but to find an abandoned spacecraft is like a dream come true. These space shuttles were designed during the Cold War, but after just one flight, the entire program was basically scrapped. However, nobody ever thought to throw the space shuttles away. There are still 2 of them sitting in a disused hangar, completely abandoned near the launch pad where the first failed Soviet spacecraft took flight. The actual launch pad is still an active spaceport, which sends astronauts to the International Space Station. But the hangar with the abandoned space shuttles is located a little way off and is in serious disrepair. A French photographer visited the site between 2015 and 2017, and he captured some pretty fantastic images of the unfinished and oddly depressing space vehicles. The shuttles are extremely similar to the original United States model, which is not that surprising considering the USSR had pretty much cloned whatever piece of technology the Americans invented. Even the paint job of white and black on the disused space shuttle is pretty much the same as what the Americans came up with first. Bugatti Veyron. Our last story also involves Russia. A Bugatti Veyron was found completely forgotten and abandoned in an undisclosed location in Russia, and the story behind it is a little odd and not entirely convincing. Supposedly, the Veyron was involved in an accident in early 2013 when it was hit by an Aston Martin. Rather than repair the Veyron or deal with the insurance, it was actually cheaper to just ditch it. While the full details of the story are vague and unconfirmed, there are legit photos of the Veyron with its back end totally demolished, sitting outside what looks to be a mechanic shop. If the guy really did abandon the vehicle, the towing company who picked it up probably got to keep it free of charge. That would be just about one of the best scores a towing company could make. After all, what kind of maniac just leaves a Bugatti abandoned because of a little fender bender? If you could restore one of these awesome abandoned vehicles, which one would you choose? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe for all the best videos. See you again soon. What is the most expensive car that you have ever driven or driven in?